So you'll become a member automatically, and we really want to help you make you as effective as possible in your role, um, not only individually, but as a team as well. And so we offer both individual and team development opportunities, including online and in-person courses and workshops. And so, um, just know that you'll see information about things like superintendent search, legal counsel, strategic planning, all kinds of things like that. So that's the association. My name is Debbie Stair, and I'm the Assistant Director for Leadership Development. I've been on staff for 11 years now, and I'm really sort of responsible for all things out in districts. So if your board had a workshop or wanted a strategic plan, I would either do it myself or coordinate one of our other facilitators to come out and work in your district. Prior to being on staff, I was a longtime board member myself, served over 15 years at my local district, and also served on my ISD board. And with me tonight is Brad Banasic, also on staff here. And Brad, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Debbie. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining Debbie and I. We really appreciate your attendance here tonight and definitely appreciate your interest in running for a school board position. Debbie mentioned my name is Brad Banasic. I am legal counsel for MASB. I've been with MASB a little over 27 years now. Came here right out of law schools. Started writing policy for MASB. That's one of the main things you're going to become familiar with as a board member is your board policy manual. And that was one of the first things I did for school districts is write policy for them. Now I am the legal counsel for MASB. And I assist school boards and members and superintendents with, I say, risk management issues relating to school law. So if you have a question about school law, need information about school law, I can assist with that. A lot of my time is spent answering questions, whether by email or phone calls. But like Debbie, I'm out in the districts as well, doing a workshop for a board on the Open Meetings Act or conflicts of interest, and also teaching multiple CBA classes on school law topics.
Okay, thank you, Brad. And thanks for one of our participants tonight for reminding me that I had not started the sharing screen. So that's good. Lots of little details to take care of instead of just presenting the information tonight. So hopefully all of you see the slideshow now. And so before we get started, we need to sort of do a moment from our sponsor, if you will. MASB's Get On Board campaign is generously supported by Neola. Effective policies are at the core of successful school district governance and one of the primary functions of a school board member. Maintaining policies that reflect both the local oversight and ever-changing state and federal laws is an enormous task. School board members can rely on the MASB Neola partnership to keep their policy manuals up to date. Working together, MASB and Neola produce uniform school policies and guidelines to better serve all Michigan school districts. You can head to Neola's website at neola.com to learn more about how they help districts set direction through policy. So as we get started here, I'm going to ask that for any of you who feel comfortable, if you want to share in the chat, we'll use the chat function tonight primarily for questions and answers and anything else until we get to the end of the presentation when we'll open it up for live questions. So if you want to share, your name and what district you're considering running for, if you feel comfortable doing that, it's always nice to see all the different districts represented around the state. All right, so tonight's agenda is going to be several things. The first one is sort of talking about why would you run for a school board seat? How is it that boards actually influence student success? The role of a board member, and then some important election information, and then getting ready to serve. And then we'll also provide you some additional resources that you'll have on hand should you be elected for school board. So we've got some a good variety of folks. We've got Flint and Southfield, Chelsea, Oak Park, Ferndale. Good to see a lot of different folks here tonight and a lot of districts represented. Okay. So here's a quote, and you can see the reference at the bottom of the slide here. And I just want to read it and then ask you to, again, maybe put in the chat what really stands out to you about this quote? What concept or words really seem important or impressive to you? Board members, because they represent the people and have the power to act, and superintendents, because they have professional knowledge and the responsibility to lead and manage, are close enough to communities and schools to see what needs to be done and are powerful enough to do it. They are the governance team. So what concepts really seem to just jump out at you? If we could get some folks to put that in the chat, that would be wonderful. So I know for me, one of the things that really stands out is the boards have the power to act. And that is so true. Your power lies at the table when you come together as a group of 7 board members to take action on the items that are put before you. And the other one for me is that superintendents having the responsibility to lead and manage. And that really helps define the differences between boards and superintendents, right? Boards take action to provide direction, and then superintendents lead and manage the district on a daily basis to make things happen. Now, I see a few people in here have put represent the people. Absolutely. You are there to represent your community and their interests and their best interests and the interests of all your students. Not individual segments of your community, but the community and the students as a whole. So those are great pieces that were picked up there. I do want to mention too, at the very end, it says they are the governance team, and it refers to not only the board, but the superintendent. And so you'll hear me use that term tonight. The governance team, we include the superintendent in that because it really is that cohesive working together that provides the most effective teams to really move the dial and make things happen in districts. Absolutely right, Melissa. Critical that both sides work well together. Okay, Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some candidate eligibility.
All right, thank you, Debbie. So generally, how the law refers to an eligible candidate is that you're an elector. You're an elector in your school district. Well, how do you become an elector? Well, you register to vote. So these are the requirements in being a registered voter. So you see that the check mark number 3 is a registered voter in the school district where you will be running. You also have to be a resident of your school district as well. That means not only being a registered voter and having a house in the district, you actually have to reside in that house. If you have a house in there and you don't live in that house and you're living somewhere else for a majority of the time, you're ineligible to serve on the board because you're not a resident of the school district. One thing that's not covered here is the issue of incompatibility. Whether you're serving in another position, a public position or an employment position that may be incompatible under law with a school board position. If that's the case, you're not prevented from running, but if you get elected to the board, then you have to decide which position you're going to serve in. And the most common example is working for the school district. So if you're a current school district staff member and you decide to run for the board, if you get elected, you're going to have to resign from the school district because you can't be the supervisor and the staff member at the same time in that type of situation.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about how it is that boards really make a difference in their communities and for their students. And I'm going to play a short video that we actually are borrowing from our foundations class, our CBA 101, which is our basic class for all new board members. And I think it really helps describe, again, those differences between what a superintendent does and what a board member does, and helps clarify that role that you will play should you be elected. So if I did everything right, we should hear the sound. So somebody's going to give me a thumbs up to make sure that you're hearing it as well as me.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you.
My school is a busy place, and there's always a lot going on in our classroom. If you look around on any given day, you'll see my class at work reading and writing, creating and engineering, thinking and growing. All of this is possible, though, because of a lot of work and planning that happened long before my class and I arrived. And it all starts with vision. The vision of the school district begins with teamwork between the superintendent and the school board. Together they view the school district from way up high. From up there at 10,000 feet, they oversee the whole school system. They see how parts relate to the whole. They see the big picture, and their perspective allows them to share what they see with the community and point the way forward. The school board established a vision that includes things like high expectations for student learning and quality instruction. Their job starts with the school district's overall vision, and then they use their own knowledge, experience, and input from our community to create big, long-term goals that we all strive for. The board members dispatch our superintendent and other administrators, like central office personnel and principals, to implement their vision. If the school board is working at 10,000 feet, these administrators are at 2,000 feet. They see a wide picture of the landscape as they oversee specific departments in schools. When it comes to staff development, monitoring student growth, and evaluating teachers, it's our administrators who are leading the way. They lay the groundwork for the school board's vision and goals as they create and implement plans. Next come the teachers and support staff who bring the plans of the administrators and the vision and goals of the school board into reality. Their view isn't from up in the air, it's right at ground level. Teachers are focused on students and providing the structure and opportunities they need to grow and learn in their classrooms. One of the things we students hear all the time is that even if we don't do something perfectly the first time, we shouldn't just give up. Instead, we should try again and learn from what didn't work. Our teachers and administrators do the very same thing. They know that there's always room to learn and grow. So they work together to constantly refine and adjust plans for continuous improvement as we all work toward making the vision of our school board a reality. Everyone in our school district has a role to play in creating a place where students can grow and learn to the very best of their ability. From the school board that starts with the vision to the administrators who plan how to make it happen and keep an eye on progress, to the teachers who put those plans into action, to me who is ready to do great things, including getting an A on my math test tomorrow. We are all doing our part to make our district a successful one.
Okay, great. So hopefully that sort of broke things out a little bit. And one of the reasons I like to show that in this session that we have is because I think many new board members, as I go around the state working with new teams, have a bit of a problem sort of defining what is it exactly that I do here. If I don't manage the district on a day-to-day basis, then what is this weird thing called governance? Because it's not what we do in our daily lives, right? Most of us, whether we're working outside the home, inside the home these days, or just working at home, we either are the ones who roll up our sleeves and do the work, or we manage people who do. But governance is very different. It is that 10,000 foot view where basically what we're doing is setting up structures and sort of guideposts that the others in your district work within. to achieve that vision that's usually set by a community, hopefully through a strategic planning process. But the board is there to really support what is it that we can do at the governance level. And we're going to talk about some of the basic priorities or roles that you will play as you go about doing your work. You are going to make, if elected, hundreds of decisions, no doubt about it. In any year, your agendas will be full of a lot of decisions. But honestly, if we really distilled it down to the four most important roles you play at that board table, it will be these four things. The first one is hiring a superintendent. If you're a board member, long enough, and nowadays with the terms that superintendents have in local districts, even in your first term, you might find yourself in a position where you're going to be hiring a new superintendent. They are the instructional leader of the district, and so it is by far the most important decision any board makes. The next piece is evaluating your superintendent. By law, boards must evaluate their superintendents on an annual basis, and it's through that evaluation process that lasts a full year that they provide feedback to the superintendent about how the board feels the superintendent is doing in the progress towards the goals that have been set, and then in some other criteria that is part of an instrument that you will use and be trained in to provide that evaluation. The next thing, most of you probably know that in your districts just last month, boards had to approve the operating budget for the upcoming school year. That has to be done by June each year. And that's really the way the board shows their support for the priorities that have been determined in the district, is by approving the budget that supports that work. The last piece is setting district policies. And that's really, again, that's those guideposts about how the district operates. What are the kinds of things our district stands for, believes in, the sort of, think of it of a fence as fencing, and then your administrators and your staff operate within those policies. So those are the four most important things that you're going to do. Obviously, you're going to work with your superintendent on each one of those things, but those are the key functions of what I would say is the responsibility of a board. Back in the early 2000s, if you can imagine this, there were no studies done on what does it take to be an effective school board member. How do you have a positive effect on student achievement in your districts? And so our counterparts in Iowa undertook a research study, and they partnered with their Superintendents Association, their State Department of Education, and Iowa University to really take a look at what is it? What are those characteristics or traits that make boards so successful and effective and have such a wonderful impact on student achievement in their districts? And so they took that research, they boiled it down into what we call the 8 traits that we're going to go over. And then they also revisited that work in the 2013-ish time period to make sure that the findings were valid and reliable, and indeed they were. And so even though we're 20 years after that research study, it's still the most comprehensive study ever done on the topic. So as I go through these traits, what I want you to be thinking of is, does that sound like me? Does that sound like something I see myself being a part of? Should I be elected? So the first one is committing to a vision of high expectations. And boards really ensure that a vision is in place and that all efforts in the district are aimed at accomplishing that vision. Remember, I said many times districts have a strategic planning process, and it's in that process that they determine their vision. There are some instances where districts have a vision and they haven't gone through a comprehensive strategic planning process, but when you do go through a big comprehensive one, you're including community and staff in the development of that vision. And so you have a lot of owners of a plan that's put in place for a district to follow. They also have strong shared beliefs and values. They agree that all students can be successful, and they put in place those supports necessary for that to happen. Again, those beliefs and values are usually developed as part of that strategic planning process, but you may find those in your district even absent a plan. Boards are accountability driven. They spend their time as a governance body that oversees, remember that's that governance work, oversight, and evaluates the work of the superintendent. And they don't get bogged down in the day-to-day operations of managing the district. So hiring and evaluation of staff members, transportation issues, curriculum issues, those are not things that boards typically deal with on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes the superintendent will bring certain things forward that are appropriate for a board to take action on in those areas. But for the day-to-day management of all those things, that falls under the superintendent's purview. They also have a collaborative relationship, both internally and externally. And this one is often confusing for new board members as well. It doesn't mean that you as an individual board member would have conversations and relationships with each staff member or community members. What it really means is that you're working with your superintendent as a team to ensure that systems are in place so that you get real two-way communication, both between the board and staff and the board and the community. And the reason for that is so that that communication becomes a part of the data that's used in board decision-making and planning for the district. But it's about structures. You keep hearing me say structures. Effective boards are data savvy. They understand the importance of using data in the decision-making process, and they work with the superintendent to determine what data will be most useful. Nowadays, there's so much data available to us that we have to have those conversations early in every decision-making process to say, what data are we going to use to know that we're successful down the road? When I first started as a board member, the data was not available like it is. And so oftentimes decisions were made by the gut. And I'm so grateful now that districts have so much of data available to them so that they make really good, solid-based decisions. They also align and sustain resources, so ensuring that the necessary resources are available to achieve your mission and vision. And this is, again, mostly accomplished through that annual budget that includes things like materials and professional development. And so that means even in very difficult budgetary times, when boards are making decisions about making some cuts in their districts, they really try their absolute best to ensure that the critical pieces for teaching and learning are still included in that budget, those materials and professional development for staff members. They also lead as a united team with the superintendent. Now, I don't mean that every vote is a 7-0 vote. I don't want you to think that that's what I'm saying there. But what it does mean is support of initiatives once a vote's been taken. You know, you as an individual board member have zero authority. Remember how I said at the very beginning, your authority comes from action taken at the board table. And once that vote's been taken, that's the direction the district is headed in. And it really serves the district best when everybody can get on board to say, okay, here's the decision we've made. How are we going to know that it was the right decision? What kind of updates are we going to hear? And how will we be evaluating that success? So it's really all about coming together as that team of 8, that governance team, and determining what are the best decisions regarding the issues at hand. Sometimes those decisions will be very hard. This is hard work. It's not for the faint at heart, that's for sure. But they'll also be very rewarding decisions when you see the positive effect on the students in your district. They also take part in team development and training. So just as you would expect the professional staff working in your district to need ongoing professional development, you really should expect that of yourself and your colleagues at the table as well. Again, some of your learning will be individual classes that you might sign up for. And then some will be with your governance team as a whole, where you might have retreats or work sessions together so that you learn together. One of the things we know about adult learning is it really has the biggest sort of bang for your buck when it's together. But there are still times when individuals need additional information in different content areas. But really, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make in this area is to assume that because you went to school, you know all you need to know to govern a district, right? The school that we all went to is not the school that our students are going to now. And we're preparing them for a different future than our future. So it shouldn't be the same school. So that means that we have to take it upon ourselves to make a commitment to really understand what practices are important now versus what we might have used in the past. So those are the 8 traits. I hope you gave some thought to those things as you heard about them. Another document that I want to encourage you to seek out on our website, and again, you're going to get these slides, so don't feel like you've got to grab that URL, but it's called our governance standards. And so it's in part based on the same research, but we took it a step farther, and board members in Michigan came together to develop these standards. There's some standards that are for the individual board member, along with questions to ask yourself as you sort of think through this process of determining to put your name on the ballot. And then there's also some governance standards about your team as a whole. And those are great conversations to have at the board table with the questions that are included with those standards to say, how do we stack up against these standards? And are we doing the best that we can do? They're downloadable from our website. So again, I would encourage you to take a look at those when you get a chance. So here's some questions for you to consider. So the first one's pretty easy. Do you meet the candidate eligibility that Brad shared with you earlier? It's either a yes or no for that one, right? Do you understand the role better now? The role of governance of a board versus management and operations of your staff. And then the next 2 are a little bit harder, right? Are you ready to make the commitment? So know that each board in districts is a little bit different. But I want you to know that what you see, that meeting or 2 a month, is the tip of the iceberg, right? It is not the only commitment you'll be making should you run for a board seat. There's homework that needs to happen for those board meetings. There's, in many instances, subcommittee meetings that you'd be attending, depending upon which topic area you've been assigned. There are going to be events to attend, board development opportunities. There may be other assignments, liaisons for buildings, depending upon your district. So if anybody told you it's just that meeting or 2 a month, they're not being honest with you. And I really want you to think very deeply about the commitment. And is this the right time for your commitment? Like, does it balance well with your community, your other community responsibilities, or your family or work responsibilities? And sometimes the answer is yes. And if so, that's great. And if it's no right now, it doesn't mean that it will be no always, right? So really think about, do I have the time and energy and effort to give it my best? And then that might help you answer that question. For most of you that are running, this is going to either be a 4 or 6 year commitment. districts determine whether they're 4-year terms or 6-year terms. So you want to make sure that you know what term you're running for. Those that are running for a vacated seat, so someone had resigned and so you're running just to fill that seat, you might only be running for a year or two. That commitment's much easier to make. But I really would ask you to think about, am I ready to make that 4 or 6-year commitment if that's the seat that I'm running for? The last question is, why are you running? Right? What is bringing you to this conversation tonight? Hopefully it's not the accolades that you expect to get, or the big paycheck, or the perks. All of those things are few and far between, right? I really hope that it's more like you want to give back to your community. You want to ensure that the best opportunities for success are available to your students, that you feel that your experience or your expertise would be beneficial to your governance team. That's what I hope that you're using to determine why you're running. Like I said, this is hard work, difficult decisions. Sometimes you'll make decisions potentially that might even have an impact on your own student. And yet it's still the best decision for the district. So there are tough things ahead, but it's also some of the most rewarding work. It's also some of the most rewarding work that you will ever do.
Maybe there was a request in the chat box.
Okay.
Says that when you get the chance, can you repeat the name of or the info about the study that informed the 8 traits as well as the document?
Absolutely. It's called the Iowa Lighthouse Research Study. And you should be able to just type it into Google and find that information. And if you have any trouble, we're going to give you our contact information at the end, and we'd be happy to guide you in the right location. Okay, so as I gave you those things to ponder, right, I'm going to turn it back over to Brad, and he's going to talk about some of the legal stuff around the actual election.
Well, thank you, Debbie. So you'll have some filing requirements to take care of, and if you haven't done this already, time is running out. So you want to get it done before the filing deadline. You have the option of paying a non-refundable $100 filing fee or filing petitions. And if you live in a school district that has a population of 10,000 or less, I think most folks would maybe opt for the petition because the threshold amount for that petition is very small. You just have to have 6 signatures, but you should obviously get more than 6 just to make sure 1 or 2 of those signatures maybe it's not valid. So that's one document that must be filed. Another one is the affidavit of identity. This document attests that you're eligible to run for a school board position. And on both the petition and the affidavit of identity, you're required to identify the term that you're running for. As Debbie mentioned, there could be multiple options as far as terms that are up for election on your board. In some cases, a board may be transitioning from 4-year to 6-year terms. If they're doing that, then you may have both 4-year and 6-year terms on the ballot. Or as Debbie indicated, if there's been a vacancy since the last election, there may be an abbreviated term that is on the ballot, because when someone is appointed to fill a vacancy, that individual does not fill out the remainder of the term. They're only appointed until the next election. So check with your school district. If you haven't filed yet, see what terms are available. And if there is a 2-year term, and if you just want to get your feet wet in serving on the board, you may want to consider running for that abbreviated 2-year term. So the Campaign Finance Act is a law that really does what it says. It oversees the money spent by candidates that run for office. And this Campaign Finance Act applies to our governor, all the way down to school board members. Now, school board members will only be subject to it if you spend over $1,000 in campaigning for your school board position. And once you go over that $1,000 threshold, there are a number of requirements that have to be met to satisfy the requirements of the Campaign Finance Act. Or even if you don't spend $1,000, you still may be subject to the act if you are running in a school district that has more than 2,400 students. If you have more than 2,400 students, you are automatically subject to the Campaign Finance Act, regardless of how much money you spend in your campaign. And then we have a Get On Board video that's available on our website. Encourage you to watch that video. A lot of information in that video comes from our candidates guide, which is also on the Get On Board website. So if you go to the next slide, Debbie. So some key election dates. We talked about the deadline. It's coming up quick. Debbie mentioned we have one more forum coming up, one more town hall coming up next week. And then after that, the deadline, July 23rd by 4 p.m., where you have to pay your filing fee or file your nominating petition. Now, if you have second thoughts, you can still withdraw your name by July 26th by 4 p.m. If you decide, no, I really decide I don't want to run for the board, you can take your name off the ballot. But after July 26th, your name's going to be on the ballot regardless. If you get a job out of town and you have to move, you're still going to be on the ballot. So you would get elected, but you would not, you could possibly get elected, but you would not be able to accept of office because you're no longer a resident in the school district. Write-in candidates, if you miss the opportunity to file the petitions or your filing fee, another opportunity is to run as a write-in candidate. And you simply can't say, I'm going to be a write-in candidate, please vote for me. You actually have to file what's called a declaration of intent to be a write-in candidate. So votes for someone as a write-in candidate are only counted if that person has filed a declaration of intent to be a write-in candidate by 4 p.m. on October 25th. And then we have our general election date, November 5th. That's when it all happens. But now with absentee voting, I know many of you will probably vote prior to that election date. Importantly, once you hear that you are elected, you will receive a certification of election from your election coordinator, likely going to be your county clerk. Within 10 days of that, you have to accept the office of Board of Education member. This is a notarized document. It attests that you are accepting your office that you've been elected to. You sign it and it's notarized and then filed with the county clerk. Generally, districts will have you file this and I guess complete it while you do your official oath of office as well. That is another requirement. You have to take the oath of being a board member prior to serving in that office. And then if you're elected to a full term, your term officially begins on January 1st. One little nuance to that, if you are elected to an abbreviated term, then you would begin your term as soon as the election results are certified. That's just a quirk in the law that applies to vacated terms.
In this information session, we don't go into how to campaign, but I do want to give you a few best practices that we've put together over time that I really think you should sort of think about. The first one is don't take the election or re-election for granted. And I say re-election because I see a couple of names on here I recognize as currently sitting board members. If you want the election and you want to sit at that board table, then you need to work for it. It doesn't come easy, even if you've been on the board. And so for some of you in highly contested races or in larger districts, that might mean spending money, printing signs or whatever. In smaller districts or where you're not heavily opposed, the campaign might just be door-to-door knocking or phone calls or whatever, but you might have to work for this seat. And so you can't take your name recognition or your record for granted. Keep the campaign away from the boardroom or the board table. The boardroom is to do board business. And so using that as an avenue to campaign, I think really does a disservice to the district as a whole. Certainly you can make comments, whether you're a currently seated board member or as a public member speaking public comment, but really doing your best to keep the campaign out where it belongs in the community. Keep it positive, really talking about the strengths that you bring instead of using it, having conversations about why you're running against someone else. What things do you bring to the table? What are your accomplishments? What training or experience is going to make you a good board member? I really encourage you not to make promises you can't keep. We all run on platforms. I know that. I did it too. But cautioning you to say, remember, you're only one vote of 7. And sometimes you're going to learn additional information through your homework and research and data that's provided to you that may even change your mind on things from where you might be today. So those promises should be few and far between. And then don't go too far out on a limb. And what I mean by that is you don't know who's going to be sitting at that board table with you. It might be somebody you've just campaigned with or against. And so how you run that campaign can have an impact on how you then become an effective team, right? A collaborative, collegial team working together. And so, whoever the community sends to that table is the group that's going to have to figure out how to work together. It's much easier to build trust and make good decisions when we haven't really beat up each other like we might see at the state and national, election level. So those are just some things to think about as you begin a campaign for the office. Brad, back to you.
So what happens after the election? You have the certification of election. We talked a little bit about that already. You'll receive that from your election coordinator, which is the county clerk. And you have to do your acceptance of office within 10 days after receiving that certification. As I mentioned, generally, school districts will have you do the acceptance of office and oath of office at the same time. That's the official oath of office that is notarized. And then sometimes there will be a second ceremonial oath of office that's done at your organizational meeting in January. So you can kind of take the oath in the Board of Education setting in front of the community. And then your last obligation there before you take office, you file a campaign finance compliant affidavit. Generally, that's telling the state that if you are subject to the Campaign Finance Act, that you've met all the requirements. Everything is paid up. Recently we had a situation in the community where I live where our county clerk, the current county, or excuse me, the township clerk was taken off the ballot because that individual had an outstanding fee under the Campaign Finance Act, and it was not paid. And under law, the county clerk was required to take that person off the ballot because of that outstanding fee that had not been paid. So make sure everything is paid up. And if there's anything that needs to be taken care of, you take care of it before you sign off on your compliance affidavit and you take office as of January 1.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Brad. So a few things that you can do. So, let's say that congratulations are in order. You've been elected. You don't have to wait till that January 1 date to actually get started in preparation for your board service. I would encourage you to reach out to your district about a potential new board member orientation. Some districts have very detailed orientation processes. Some are a little more loose, but they usually include things like meeting with the board president and superintendent. That might mean in a larger district meeting with other department heads, being provided with some materials, copies of the budget, contracts, those kinds of things. Really just getting you started to get some understanding and giving you some resources and background for that work that you're going to begin. Also, asking for a mentor, I think, is a great opportunity. Some districts will offer you one automatically as part of their orientation process. But in other instances, if you know someone on the board that you think would be of benefit to maybe be assigned as your mentor, or asking the president who might be a good person to do that. It's not someone who's going to tell you what to do. That's not what's meant by this. It's really the person that you can sort of turn to and ask questions when you need a little bit more background information or historical information, someone who might be able to sit next to you at the board table in case you need some additional help in the beginning, maybe even ride to a class together. It's just that extra person that you can turn to when you might have some needs. I want to encourage you to sign up for that Fundamentals of Board Service class, our CBA 101. It is a 6-hour class if taken in person or virtually. We offer both of those options. We also offer an online asynchronous class. So if our calendar doesn't fit your schedule, there's a different option for you. It is partially reimbursable by the state of Michigan, because we have a board reimbursement training act. And so because that's a 6-hour class, it's reimbursed at about half. Your district should pay the fee for you. Most districts have board training money in their budgets. And so you simply just have to ask what the process is to have that used to pay for your class. I mentioned that board members evaluate their superintendent on an annual basis and that they must be trained. That's a state mandated training. And so whatever tool or instrument your district uses, the maker of that tool provides training. And so you'll want to ask your superintendent or board president who you need to get that training from. And you should have that training before you are put in the position of evaluating your superintendent. Now, many boards across the state don't evaluate their superintendent until December. So when you start in January, you have plenty of time. But there are still a number of districts who evaluate their superintendents in the spring. And so that means you're going to want to make sure you get that training relatively soon after you take your seat. The last one is MASB's Level 1 Certified Board Member Award classes. These are all 3-hour classes. They are also, again, offered in person, virtually, and asynchronous online. These are fully refunded through that Board Training Act. So your district pays for it, and then they are reimbursed for your training. Whereas the fundamentals class gives you a little bit of information about a lot of things to help set you up for success. These classes are very specific, very content oriented about different things. So one class will be about policy, another will be finance, another will be curriculum. So very more in-depth conversations. We encourage board members to take the basic level classes to really give them a good, solid understanding of the kinds of things that they're going to be dealing with at the board table. Some recommended reading. Again, your board office, your district office will sometimes provide you with some of these resources up front. And if not, sometimes all you have to do is ask for them and they'll make the purchase and provide them to you. The first 3 publications on the left-hand side are publications that MASB develops, and Brad's responsible for the Open Meetings Guide, and then the third one, the Revised School Code. He's extremely good at taking very complicated legalese and turning it into very user-friendly language for all of the rest of us folks, right? Who just need to know what it says and what I need to be aware of, and how it impacts me. And so Brad and his team do a really good job of putting those two documents together. Those are both really important documents that I would suggest. That second one, Surviving Your First Year, was really put together with the help of a lot of new board members in sort of a question and answer format about what are the kinds of things they wish they would have known their first year, things that they could have used some assistance with. And so it's a real easy read, but a nice companion piece. The two on the right are both National School Boards Association publications. I will say the Becoming a Better Board Member book, it's about an inch thick, and it was what I considered my Bible. It covers every topic you could think of. And anytime I had a question, I could turn to that book and find the answer pretty much. I still have my dog-eared copy all these years later, even though they're on their fourth or fifth version of the book, but definitely a great investment. And you can get that through our bookstore, and it's actually cheaper than going directly to NSBA. The last one is The Key Work of School Boards. It's really, again, sort of based on that Iowa Lighthouse research study. It really talks about what are the 5 areas boards should be paying attention to. And then it's really sort of a workbook, if you will, about how boards can look at their district to see how they're doing in those various 5 areas. And so it's a great book, not only for you as an individual, but for your board as a team. All available on our bookstore. Again, these are the town hall dates for this year, the last one next Thursday on the 18th. So again, if you know anybody else who's considering a run and maybe hasn't had an opportunity to attend one of our earlier ones, please encourage them to attend next Thursday. Like I said, we are recording this one, so we'll put it up on the website if that date doesn't work for them. So with that, we've covered everything on our list. So now I'd like to open it up for any additional questions that you might have that Brad and I can take a stab at. If you think of a question after our time together here, you've got this email address, and you can certainly reach out to us through that or through the website. We're easy to find. There's pictures of us. You just have to click and you can contact us, and we are more than happy to answer any questions you might have to help you determine, first, do you want to be on the ballot? And second, if you're elected, we are here, again, to help you be the most effective board member you can be. And so our staff is ready and willing to help you and answer any questions that you might have and provide any support. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but you can also feel free to open your microphone if you want to do that to ask any questions as well.
Yeah, we got a lot of incompatible questions there in the chat.
I saw that. I was following that. You were doing a great job, Brad, of getting those covered.
Trying to keep up there.
But so maybe do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can expand on the one question I think someone asked. Is there a list of offices that are incompatible with one another? And that was a great question. So clearly, if the position is related to the school district, a coach, teacher, support staff position, yeah, clearly incompatible. We know that. Where there's gray area is another elected position, and that's when it becomes very factually specific. So let's say you want to be on city council and you're on city council and maybe you want to run for the school board as well. Can you serve on both of those bodies at the same time? Really depends on the relationship between the city and the school district. And, are there competing interests where you would be on both sides of an issue and you can't represent the city and the school board equally? And that's what creates the incompatible situation. And you can't fix incompatibility by abstaining. You actually have to resign from one of the two incompatible positions. So a question here, how do we determine when districts have board positions up for elections? Is it in a state database? It is not. I think so that's actually a great question, William. Districts at one point were required to post that when they conducted their own elections. Way back when, districts actually conducted the elections. But now it's been taken out of their hands and it's conducted by the clerks. And there isn't any obligation for the clerks to post what positions are up for election. I think both Debbie and I would encourage school districts to post their open positions because you want people running for the school board and you want them to know what positions are up for election. Even if you have great incumbents, I still think you want your community to know these positions are up for election, and we need all the candidates we can get because we want to give our constituents an opportunity to have a good slate of candidates.
Yeah, I think for most of you, a simple phone call to the superintendent's office, they should be able to tell you what seats are up for election if they have not publicized it. And you can get that information directly from them, or you could go to the county clerk's office. They would know that. But yeah, we certainly hope that districts give out that information. And, sort of attached to that, let's say you run and, we've talked about, well, if you get elected, here are these things you need to know. If you don't get elected, there's always the potential for a future run or a future appointment should someone have to leave the board early for some reason. And I would encourage you to let your districts know that you're interested in being involved in the district somehow, right? So when they do a strategic plan or have some other major initiative that includes community in that, they'll think about you and potentially reach out to you to have you involved in that. So it's not a one and done kind of situations. I applied actually for a vacancy first and somebody else was selected. And I came back because I really felt like I had something to offer. And so I ran later, but the district gave me opportunities to be involved in that interim through some committee work and things like that. So, there's more than one way to serve your district. Somebody else asked Brad about the superintendent, the resources for helping board members in hiring or evaluating. So in hiring, when your district finds out their superintendent is leaving, we automatically reach out to that district and offer them a complimentary work session where we talk about the things they need to consider as they move forward in that process. It's not a sales pitch. There's nothing attached to it, no fee. What we want to do is provide good information so that boards can make good decisions about what path they want to move in as they look for a superintendent. And then when it comes to evaluating, absolutely, I mentioned that if you're using, for instance, our tool, we would provide you with those resources and that training. And then we also offer a service where we come out and we can facilitate that superintendent's evaluation process so that board members can just really concentrate on being a part of the process versus actually running the process. So there's lots of assistance available in that. We try and make the evaluation process as easy as possible with rubrics, and our instrument is on our website. You have access to that if you want to see what that looks like, but there are some other instruments in the state being used by other developers. And it's really all about a board and superintendent team determining which instrument serves them best. And then again, making sure everyone's trained in it.
Now, also on the evaluation webpage, we have some evaluation FAQs. If you're interested in learning about the evaluation law that applies to superintendents and administrators, the FAQs cover all of the essentially new requirements that went into effect July 1. We had major amendments to the evaluation law this past legislative session, and they just took effect. So the FAQ document was updated to include all these new requirements.
Yeah, and along with that came a mandated new retraining of every board member in the state. And so your board members, many of them are doing the training over the next couple of months. And if they are, you can sit through that process as a public member watching the training. If that's something of interest to you so that you have it. You still would have to take it officially once you've been seated, but you can certainly be a spectator in that training. Now, I do think somebody started to open their mic at some point and ask a question. David, it's you. Okay.
Yeah. I'm on a community relations committee and a policy committee, and also like I'm very interested in having for a while starting a male mentor program in high school. If I was lucky enough to be elected, are all of those three things kind of off the table for me? I kind of think probably yes, but I just kind of curious.
So you're serving on those first two committees as a community member representative, I'm assuming. Yeah, you likely would be giving up that seat to a new community member, right? But it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be other meetings and committees you might be assigned to that the board has. And sometimes those committee meetings might have both board and community members in them, and sometimes they might be separate. So you would have to talk with your superintendent and your board president to see whether you still would be a part of those or whether they would prefer that you give that slot to a new community member to serve. The mentor piece, I'm not saying you'd have to give that up. I think you would have to walk a fine line between advocating for something and also potentially being responsible for making a decision about it, right? At the board table, let's say it came to the board for some sort of action, and you would want to share that with your colleagues and what conflict you might have. Brad, would you have anything around that issue?
Yeah, I would compare that to maybe being involved in your athletic boosters or band boosters, maybe serving in an officer position for one of those support groups because, they're affiliated with the school district, but there's kind of an arm's length relationship. And from what was being described, I think the mentoring program would be similar to that. So yeah, I would echo what Debbie was saying, fully transparent about it, full disclosure. And, if you're going to be working closely in a school building, talk with the building administrators and how they would feel about that, to have a board member, being that involved in an activity at that building level to get their input. But you would certainly want to be fully transparent about it.
Yeah, I know, I was heavily involved in my district in PTA and, some of those other things that were related to my students. And what I tended to do was after I became a board member was I stepped away from the leadership positions and I still stayed involved, right? So I still was able to participate fully, but I wanted there to be just a little bit of definition between those things. And I will tell you, ultimately, it will make your life somewhat easier when you're not a leader of one of those things and on the board.
Well, and this is another question that, from a relationship point of view, I mean, I've been a part of this district for a long time, and mostly because I'm old. But and I've developed relationships with, work with teachers and who are now administrators, and I have good relationships. You as a board members, did those change once you became a board member? Do your teachers and administrators, and I don't know if it'd make a difference for me to run or not, but do those relationships change with those people once you become a board member?
I'm going to say absolutely yes. once your board hat sits firmly on your head, you can't take it off. You might try. You might be able to say, look, I'm just a parent. But they have a hard time taking it off. You're now, a leader of the district. And so, yes, they'll change. Does it mean that you can't have any of those relationships, or that they're all going to now be, really difficult? No, absolutely not. You're going to still have some of those relationships. People are still going to, want to come and talk to you. You're still going to want to keep those friendships that you've built. But you'll have to get really good really fast about explaining what your role is and what your role isn't to those individuals, and helping them understand where to take their concerns to get them best addressed when they have them. Right? Because there's chains of command, and they're there for a reason, because people need to work within those in order to help leaders lead.
I assume that because over a decade, I've had some really open and honest conversations with these people. And I assume I would, like I said, if I was lucky enough to get elected, I think, if I'm correct, we'd have to be very careful with maybe some of those open and honest conversations.
Yeah, you will have to be, at many times, there's information that you're going to have that is confidential, whether it's for a legal reason or something like that, right? So you're going to have to monitor what you can and can't say at times, information that you can't share. And then, what I got pretty good at saying was, I appreciate the concerns that you've raised, and I want you to know that they will be a part of my decision-making process, right? Because that one perspective can't be everything. There's going to be so many more pieces of information that you're going to take in before being asked to make a decision, that's one piece of information you'll use. And there will be times when you share some of that information with your superintendent, because it rises to that level that they need to know the things you've heard. So it's tricky at times. I'm not going to say it isn't. But I think when you understand and really help them understand where your governance role starts and stops, you'll help them, and you'll do better work with your colleagues. But it's tricky. You get better at it over time, but it's always a little tricky.
Thank you.
I saw a question in the chat, Debbie. I think I can answer.
Okay.
It's the issue of serving on the board and then possibly working for the school district. There isn't any law that prohibits that. So you could actually be on the board and apply for a school district position, and just resign from the board if you get offered that position. Some policies will require you to resign from the board first before applying for a school district position. I've seen that in many districts. Back in the day, I actually used to see some policies that said you had to be off the board a year before working for the school district to create some distance from the possible perception of a conflict of interest. But I rarely see those policies anymore. Generally, it's if you're on the board, you have to resign first before applying for a position. And I really don't think it would hurt your chances of working for a school district, of serving on that board. I actually think it would probably help your chances, because you're familiar with the school district. You see how the district runs at a different level by serving on the board, and you'll have that appreciation as a teacher. So I can't see that being a disadvantage at all.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that, I guess, that I would say, I would ask you to consider is how quickly it is you think you want to work for the district. If it's within the time period of the term of office you're running for, then I would question whether or not now is the right time for me to run, right? If I'm going to run only to resign in 2 years when I want to apply, then maybe there's a different time in the future that would be better. Or the other option might be, if I really want to teach and I really want to be a board member, then maybe I apply in a neighboring district. And we have a lot of teachers on our boards across the state. So that's certainly, something that's doable. It gives you sort of more information about other ways of doing things. And so it's experience that you, again, bring to the board that may be helpful in conversations and in decisions. So those are the two things I would think about, as you're thinking about running. Let's see. Any other questions before we call it an evening? Let's see. Something about nominating petitions. The individuals that sign the petitions only need to be registered voters. Oh, Brad, I'm going to let you take this.
Yeah. So your petitions are going to indicate, what area you're circulating the petition in, and that person has to be a registered voter, in that municipality, in that county. Some school districts cross multiple townships. Very rare to have a school district just in one township. So you want to make sure, you're circulating the correct petition in the correct area, and only a registered voter from that area can sign that petition.
So I don't know if it's changed. So for instance, when I ran, I had 5 different municipalities.
Mhm.
So I had to have 5 different petitions for people to sign.
Yeah, that is
We were-
correct. So it
We were
isn't
all
just
in the same county. Yeah, we were all
Yeah.
in the same county, but they were still 5 different municipalities. So I had to keep those signatures separate, because otherwise it can throw out the whole petition, right?
That is correct. So you want to make sure you have the correct municipalities identified in the areas where you're circulating them.
Better safe than sorry is what I say, right?
Yeah.
If you're questioning at all how many you need, just have one for each thing.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't see any more coming in. And so if that's the case, we're going to give you back the rest of your evening. Again, thank you so much for participating. You'll receive the slide deck and the brief survey that we ask that you reply to. And again, Brad and I are here to assist you either before the election or certainly after as well. Yes, that is true. Make sure if you do buy signs that they are properly accredited to the committee that's paying for them. All that information is in the campaign finance guide that's downloadable from our website.
Yeah.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Thanks.